Is it audible? Please tell me in chat box.
Yes, sir.
Is it my screen is visible? गाडेकर सर आवाज येत नाही आहे तुमचा. Try to speak, sir.
Recording in progress.
के लिए धन्यवाद। आपने जिनको कॉल किया है वो जल्द ही आपका कॉल उठाएंगे। कृपया लाइन पर।
हॅलो.
हाँ बोला
सर मला आवाजच येत नाही हो कुणाचं, कोणी रिप्लाय पण देत नाही.
हॅलो हॅलो रावड सर आवाज येतोय? हॅलो
सर मग सुरू करू का मी?
ओके ओके सर.
माझा आवाज येतो का तुम्हाला तिकडे?
हो येतोय सर.
नाही याच्यामधून झूम मधून.
हो झूम मधून.
अच्छा, आणि स्क्रीन दिसते का माझी?
हो यस.
बर बर, मग मी चालू करतो. ठीक.
हो सर.
So good afternoon to all of you. There is a technical issue while communicating through the internet, and thanks to the organizing committee for inviting me to deliver the topic on the developing online repository of ideas and develop way forward plan. These are the outlines. Presentation I will going to cover all these points. So first of all, we will see what is repository, then what are its type, what are the institute repository softwares are there, how it is going to be open access and how it is useful to us. Then what are the scientific research domains in India and where these digital repositories are going on, they are using, and what are its advantages and limitations, right? So you know that the most of the things nowadays are become the IT based, right? So we are using the Internet of Things. So anything will be on internet. So everywhere we need to use the ICT. So you know that the physical resources, digital resources, human resources, social resources, we are going to use this effective use of ICT. And due to the COVID-19 pandemic situation all over the world, for teaching and learning management will become on the web based, right? So because of that, the ICT has comes into picture, and most of the case the data has been generated very randomly, very frequently, very large huge amount of data has been created Most of the contents are available on the website, and because of that, this content should be managed very effectively manner, right? So this content management system comes under the picture of digital resources. So you know that the most of the case, the whenever we are going to store this data, so data, you know that in the your local system, you are trying to store your data in the form of folder. Within that folder, certain different type of files are present. For example, Word file, Excel file, PowerPoint file, PDF, dot text file. There are so many different formats are present, and that file should be presented and stored in your local hard disk, and that is nothing but your local digital repository, right? So but you need to access this digital repository on the web base. So whatever your folders, the contents, your documentation, your audio, video, your programs, you are going to store on the website, and through the website it can be accessible anybody. So that is nothing but the digital resources. So we will go one by one. So what exactly the digital resources can be work? So you know that the whenever we are going to store any kind of data, so that data can be should be submitted by someone else, right? So submitter should be there. So submitter may be any person, it may be any individual person, any institute, any administrator person can able to submit this data. Even though student can create their own repository and they can submit this data. So the submission of data may be in the form of different file formats, right? So once the submitter has stored this data, so data is in nothing but in the form of files. So you know that most of the case, whenever we are trying to store the contents in the on the website, at that time the data is always trying to store in the form of data structure. They require certain software to store this data. So you know that the database management comes in picture. In database, we are trying to store the relational type of data. So in that we are trying to arrange the data in the form of tables, and while retrieving this information we need to fire the certain queries, but we required the certain data should be stored in the form of files, right? And each file has its specific tagging system. So the tagging is nothing but the metadata. We are going to store this metadata into your database, right? So we have the collection of the n number of files, n number of items with the metadata. Once this metadata has been stored, we need to manage it very effectively. That management concept is nothing but the digital repository. So the repository is a name itself indicate that we are going to store this data. Deposition, or we can say in another way, repository, right? So deposition or reposition will be happen on the server based location, and through which we are able to access it. So there are so many collection curators are there. They are able to manage these things. Even though with the help of websites, we are able to access the data. So the retrieval of these data may be by the any end user. So it's depend upon the what kind of data repository you are going to use, and on the basis of that it can be accessible. If we think that the what is exactly repository, it is nothing but the managing and storing the digital contents. So these digital contents are very useful for the institutional level, for managing and preserving your intellectual data. So we are going to put the contents on the institutional repository, and that can be managed by the staff, institutional administrator people, so that can be useful to the student. So even though this digital repository can be useful for the support of the research, teaching and learning management, administrative processes, and all these things will be happen based on the open standards. So there are certain protocols we need to follow while developing these repositories, and there are certain international standards are there. We need to agree whenever we are trying to install these softwares.
Rameshwar Naikode,
At the time we should agree
please
the international
unmute.
standards, and based on that we are going to serve your data to all over the world. So we can import the data, we can export the data, even though we can identify, store, and retrieve the digital content within your repository. So there are so many different type of advantages are there, but one thing is that how your repository can be go. So it may be useful for the decision made by the each institution. It has a very wide range of content variety of the purpose of the users. So it's depend upon the what kind of users are going to use. Then we are able to use effective use of this digital repository in the research domain. So you know that most of the papers are published in the journals in the form of articles. You are going to produce research data, e-theses, e-learning objects and teaching materials, administrative data. So these are the possible ways where we are going to use this digital repository, and this content can be accessible to the all over the world. So based on the what kind of content you are going to serve in, or you are going to store the contents in the repository, based on that it has been categorized into the different category. So very first category is ePrint archivers. Second one is the open archiver. Third one is the self archiver, and fourth one is institutional repository. So based on the what kind of data you are going to store there, on the basis of that it can be categorized. So e-print is nothing but the electronic version of your paper. So whatever the your research papers are, you are going to print. So it is again divided into the two types. So we can say that the preprints and postprints. So preprint is nothing but we are referred as the before publication of your paper, you are going to publish it on your archive, right? Or postprint means after the publication of your research article, research paper, you are going to post it on your repository. Even though you are able to store the conference papers, book chapters, reports, you can publish your lab manuals, lab procedures on the repository, so that student can access easily, and the rest of the world also can follow you. So this is the ePrint archivers. Then another thing is the open archiver. So open archiver name itself indicates that it is a free accessible. It is open to all. Anybody can access it. So it is work on the purely interoperable. So this interoperable is the initiative has been become started in the 2003 based on the open archiver initiatives. We call it as the OAI, open archiver initiatives. So that is the initiative that it can be accessible, whatever the contents you are going to reposit on the server, that can be accessible by using the certain protocols. So that open archiver initiative has developed the metadata harvesting protocol. So you know that the searching will be happen based on the metadata only. So whenever we are trying to publish or storing your data in the form of file format, at that time the file name is the one of the metadata, even though you are trying to add the certain description. So metadata is nothing but the data, the information about your data. Okay, so what kind of data you are going to store over there. So you can see all these things in detail on the openarchiver.org. So it is open access. Another very good type is self-archiving. So you can develop your own archiver, own repositories on the web server. For example, the Aura, DSpace. In DSpace, you are trying to develop your own directory, own repository, and from that you are able to store the very n number of data sites. So you can post the contents, you can publish the contents, even though you can develop your own repository for the institution level also. So that institution level is nothing but the self-archiving, but we are categorized into in different manner. So if we are going to use individual manner, that is nothing but the self-archiving. Then these are the certain examples where the repositories are very useful. So like Google Data is the one of the data repository, Internet Archivers, DSpace, Fedora, ePrints, S3. S3 now it is a Amazon Web Space, right? So Archiver, X Archivers, it can be useful in various subjects like physics, mathematics, computer science, preprints and postprints. Quackprints, which is useful in the cognitive science. Then REPEC, it is useful in the economics and working papers. even though based on the subject of the archiver, it can be the vary. So institutional repository is one of the very famous, and nowadays it is very become popular, and every institutes want to develop their own repositories. So that repository is nothing but the institutional repository. So within that, we are going to store the digital collection of your preserved data, or we are trying to store the intellectual output of the institution. So most of the case, we are going for the accreditation purpose like the NAC or NBA. At the time, we need to store the open access data to the accessing authority. So at that time, we are trying to store data on our website or on the Google Drive, right? So instead of that, if you develop your own institutional repository, so it can be effectively managed, even though you are trying to keep the versions of the development. So the whatever the development has been there. So if some of the modification has done by the some of the professor, another modification has been done by the another professor. According to that, we are going to manage the versions, and the effective version management system is going added here in the institutional repository. So we can develop, we can store the intellectual output on this repository. So why we go for the institutional repository? So you know that the context management, the content management system, learning management system, we are going to use this digital repository. Most of the case, due to the pandemic situation, all over the world, the lectures are going on the virtually. So because of that, we are trying to store the record this video, and where we are going to upload this recorded video. So this recorded video should be accessed by your students only, not the outside. So you can decide the whether it is maybe in public domain or the private domain. So there are various advantages or benefits of this institutional repository for the researcher level, for the institution level, for the community purpose. So there is an impact of the barriers. So most of the case, if we think about the researcher want to do the research in the particular domain, within that the authors are suffering to access the very good number of research articles. Even though you have published your research articles in the reputed publisher, but due to the lack of the subscription, we are not able to access those reputed journal research articles. So at that time, this is the barrier of the research work. So if you put our research work to our repositories, so it can be accessible by anybody, so that your data, your research article, your work will be dismissed. So it will be accessible to all over the world. It will be a popular one. So if it is a popular one, so it can be cited, it can be accessible by anybody, it can be followed by the peoples. So the institution name will become a famous, right? So that's why we require the institutional repository. So it will try to remove the access barriers of the literature survey for the research purpose. Then the wide dissemination, this dissemination is nothing but the all over the world we are trying to make this spreading your contents. So that content may be in the form of papers, that content in the maybe form of if the person has access to your paper, they may be cite you, the citation will be increased. It is a rapid dissemination, easy to access, cross searchable. So all over the world it is can be searchable very effectively. It is value added services. So if the number of hit counters has been increased to your website, so that your website will becomes the pop-up will become at earliest, so that the institution will become very famous. So it's based upon the hit counters of the papers, hit counters of the publication, the citation analysis. Okay, so how much time I have, sir?
Sir,
It is giving the time limit. Okay, so I think very less time is there, so I will try to cover this point very fastly. So these are the some ways of the emerging the institute repository. So it is a born digital research material. So various publication types formats are available. We can use the refer the intellectual output and store into your repository. The scholars can be used this your research work, dropping the storage. The computer cost, we are going to manage it very effectively because it is open source. Because of that, the cost of the most of the storage has been reduced. Cost of the computer is also reduced. So these are the certain open access publishing like Spark, PLOS, BOE, OE. Digital library technologies may include your metadata standards, interoperability protocols, preserving strategies, digital library, repository softwares. So many things are there. So it is very useful to the institution level. So if you observe the country wise, India become on the 11th position. So only 2.59 open door and ROR access has been developed in India. These are the softwares. 30% software use DSpace, 25% use the ePrints. These are the different ways and document types and language where the statistics of the benefits of the institution level and how they are going to be used. These are the all over the world. These are the certain name of the university. They are going to use this institutional level repository. The opportunity for the librarians also, most of the books, you know that the IIT Kharagpur has developed the libraries, right? So many old books are present and you can refer that book. Even though UGC has developed the Shodh Ganga is as one of the type of the digital repository, and within that we are going to store the thesis, and most of the case all over the world your thesis has been accessible. So this is also opportunity to the librarians. The institutional level softwares is these are the names of the softwares where the institutes are used: Areno, CDSphere, MyCore, DSpace, ePrints, Fedora. And these are the certain the functionalities across the different systems, like registration for the institutional users, document submission, approval of the moderation, archiving, dissemination, administration. And this is the architecture of the repository system. This is, we can say, the new Agbura project. So here you can see the cloud storage, maybe or any storage you are going to use, and this cloud storage can be managed your file system. So the data is in the form of very large volume. So we need to manage the web APIs, Fedora APIs, registry search, RDF query, and this is the actual working of the content management system in your digital repository. So if you have the local data on the local system and some of the data on the internet remote machine, so it is very easily interact with each other by local machine and even the remote machine. So on which place your data is there and on which place you have modified the data, according to that it will be managed the versions and it will be kept the updated data on the your repository. So the content procedure may be your technical report, conference paper, journal articles, and many more things you are going to store on your digital repository with the help of the IR software. That IR is nothing but the institutional repository, and you are going to manage the metadata with your digital object, and on the basis of that we are able to access it. So the open source content management system, learning management system is very useful for the archiving. So many different type of tools are available for content management system like Google Classroom, DCOS Learning, Online Moodle Cloud, Sakai, Courseites, Ilias, eTutor, Canvas, Ilmas, Korunfuya, OpenDX. So these are the different type of examples where we are trying to use the learning management system and content management system. Embedo, Pizza, Canvas, Blog, WordPress, social media based learning, Zoom. You know that most of the case we are using the for online classes and interaction Zoom. Cisco web-based meetings, Skype Meet Now, Gisty, GoToMeeting, BlueJeans, WebEx Teams, Uber Conference, Live Size, Circuit, Lark Meeting, Big Blue Button, Google Hangout, Microsoft Team, Prezi Video, Slack, Proton, Prezi Video, like this. So many links are there. Even though you can record your software, your video lectures by using the video recording softwares also, like Flashback Recorder, Zoom, Screenomatic, Prezi. Okay. So this Open Archive Initiative, these are the links. I don't want to discuss about these links, journals. These are the links of the ePrints, institutional archivers, repositories. So these are the typical examples where the search services has been provided. So like ROR, ROR is nothing but the registry of the open access repositories. So you need to register it on the ROR, and then it can be easily accessible, searchable by your searching service providers. Then Oyster, Open Door. Open Door is nothing but the directory of the open source access repositories. Arc, eScholarship, eThesis. Here we are going to publish your electronic thesis like your Shodh Ganga. DSpace, it is very popular and very famous. DList, XTCAT, OAI, Open Archive Initiative Metadata for Harvesting Project, ePrint, ePrint Soton, developed by the Sydney Scholarship. This is one type of repository. This is the example of the repository, how it's going to be worked by the research scholar. This is the workflow. So due to the time limit, I'm not able to cover all these points. So this is the example. We can share your content by private space, shared space, publish under the license, publish under the open access. So there, on the basis of what kind of data you are going to store, it has been categorized into the different data types. So like open access, EDTS, TL, teaching and learning, dataset, multimedia, CRIS, digitization, publishing, preservation, administration. On the basis of that, there are certain different type of websites are there that websites going to be serve you, like open source softwares like DSpace, ePaints, Fedora, Modal, Boardington, Sakai, Plone, open source software for services like IR services, open repository, ePrint services, open source service for learning management system like IR service plus library management system, VTLS, Vital, Fedora, Procost, X libraries. These are the digital tools. These are the certain examples of the multi-repository for institution level open access EDT. Right. So if we think about in India also after the independence, so many work has been research work has developed, and most of the famous names are like CSIR, ICMR, ICR, like IITs, ISCs, NITs, IIM. They are going to use such kind of different institutional level repositories. So if we think about that, the institutional repositories in Indian scenario, so nearly 50 different type of institutes, they are going to use the public domain internet, and some of the developed for their campus purpose only, campus network. The leading one are the ISC, ISI, NAN, LCR, NEO, RRI, DU, IITs, and these are the top 10 Indian institute IRs listed by the ROR, like IISc, IIMK, Institute for Management, Kozhikode. So these are the examples. In FlipNet is also one of the famous one, developed by the DSpace and based on the ROR concept. Then ePrints, OpenMed, DSpace, LDL, National Aerospace Laboratories, Digital Library, which is developed by the Indian Institute of Management, Kozhikode, Indian National Science Academy, the digital repository, knowledge harvest, fellowship, the archiver, ebook, digital library of India has developed. So there are so many advantages of the institutional level repository. So scholarly communication, visibility of the research output, the preservation of the institute heritage, reduce the publication delay, faster communication, increase the citation of your publication, strengthen the especially Indian context, effective communication. So many things are there. The technical benefit is that it is free software. So it is very useful to the low income countries. Easy to establish, technical helps are available, interoperable based on the OAI, distributed. So we can distribute on network and share, searchable, Google, Yahoo, specialized like Spera, usage, impact, Imbrigo. So there are so many technical and other benefits, like it is good for the readers, good for the authors, good for the funders, good for the institution, good for the every individual levels also. So there are certain constraints also. The absence of well-defined institutional policy, because of that we are not able to develop the IRs. The lack of the IR expertise in media, insufficient funds of the IT infrastructure and manpower, the authors towards to time consuming the lengthy decomposition procedure, and so many rest of the constraints are there. So here, this is the repository link. You can able to find out the how many different type of open source softwares are present for the digital repository. So thank you very much. So if you have any questions, please ask me. Any questions?
If any
Any questions,
questions,
sir? So I am not able to
participant,
listen you.
please
So try to
ask
write the
kindly.
question into the chat box.
Participant, I request, if any question, any doubt, please ask to sir. Okay, no question. Sir, thank you very much, sir, for interesting session. Developing online repository, of idea develops and way forward plan. So, sir, explain what is a repository, type of repository, benefits of institution of online repository software, different types of repository softwares available in online, service provider sites, advantages of online repository, etc. So now I am request to Mr. PC Doke sir, vote of thanks. Please, sir.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, one and all. We all are here gathered here for attending this wonderful webinar on developing online repository of ideas, develop and way forward plans. I would like to present vote of thanks. It is pride for me that I got a chance to thank everyone present here for this webinar. I would like to thank the respected guest of this webinar, Dr. Siddharth Dabade sir, for attending this webinar and giving such valuable information to all of us. It is my pleasure to thank all the dignitaries, our principal, Dr. S.B. Dahikar sir, for guiding us and giving us opportunity for attending this webinar. I would like to thank our HOD of Chemistry Department, Mr. Kashi sir, for guide us. I also thanks Dr. S.P. Gadekar sir for arranging this wonderful webinar. Last but not the least, I would like to thanks all the staff member, student present here for this wonderful webinar and I announcing that this webinar is over here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Lastly, I am conclude this meeting with kind permission, college principal, Dr. S.B. Dahikar, sir. Thank you. Have a nice day.